The bread basket had been on the left side of that kitchen table for so long that when he moved it, something in the room changed before I understood why. That pale square where it had always sat. The wood lighter underneath. I looked at it and felt something go quiet inside me, the particular quiet that is not peace. He was already unfolding his papers. He did not look up. He said my name once. That single word. The way he said it told me he had been waiting to say it for a long time. Then he set everything out on that table, and folded his hands, and waited in a way that told me the waiting had also been rehearsed. He said the house was going in his name. The car. The investment account he had managed since the mid-90s. The one I had not looked at closely in years because I trusted him, because I had not yet learned the specific cost of that kind of trust. He went through the list. His voice was steady. He had crossed from planning into certainty some time ago, and this was just the moment I was allowed to see it. He asked if I understood. I said I did. He pushed the pen toward me. It slid across that pale square and stopped near my hand. I did not pick it up right away. My lawyer called 3 days later. 22 years in family law. She used the word inequitable twice. She said leverage. She told me I had recourse and that the paperwork was not binding until I made it so, and that she had seen situations like this many times, and the women who fought always came out better than the women who did not. I thanked her for everything she had laid out. I told her I understood all of it. I signed the papers that afternoon. She called back within an hour. I did not answer. My name is Cora Jean. I am 63 years old. If it is late where you are and something in this story has found a place in you, I am glad you stayed. There is more to this than what you have heard so far. Subscribe if you want to know how it ends. And if you have ever sat across from someone who moved something you had placed carefully, and felt that particular kind of still before you understood what it meant, then I think you already know something about what I am going to tell you. I grew up in Birmingham, Alabama, on a street where the houses sat close enough together that in summer you could hear your neighbor's radio through the wall. My mother had a saying she repeated so many times it stopped sounding like words. She said, "The one who walks away calm has already counted what they are carrying." I thought for most of my life that she meant something about appearances, about looking composed when you feel something else. I was wrong about that. I met him in 1979. He was in accounting and I was in my second year of nursing school, and he had a particular kind of smile. The kind that makes you feel like the only person standing in whatever room you are in together. I was 24 years old, and I did not yet know the difference between someone choosing you and someone deciding you were convenient. I may never have known that difference clearly. Even now I am not entirely sure which one it was. We married in 1980. We moved into a house on the south side of Birmingham, and over the years we filled it the way most people do. Slowly. With furniture and children and disagreements that went unfinished, and one spring, sometime in the early 2000s, when we laughed together nearly every day for 6 weeks for no reason either of us could name. That season just arrived and then it passed and neither of us reached for it when it was going. I have thought about that spring many times. I wonder sometimes if I should have held on to it differently, treated it as something fragile instead of something that would simply continue. But I think I already knew by then, somewhere I was not admitting to, that what we had was not going to continue. I just had not decided what to do with that knowledge yet. We had 2 daughters. The older one went to college in Nashville and built a life there that never quite curved back. The younger one stayed near Birmingham and called me every other day and seemed to know when something was shifting before I had given it a name. There was a moment, I think it was 3 or 4 years before the papers appeared on that table. I walked into the kitchen and he was on the phone, and he turned his back to me, just turned mid-sentence, and kept talking like I was not there. I stood at the edge of the doorway for a moment, and then I went back upstairs. I made coffee. I folded laundry. I did not say anything about it that night or afterward. But I thought about it. More than once. And I think that is when I started paying attention differently. I spent 31 years as a nurse. I came home tired in a way that is particular to caring work, emptied out in a way that is hard to describe to someone who has not done it. He was usually asleep by the time I got in, or the television was low, and he was somewhere past the point of conversation. We learned how to be in the same house without requiring much of each other. I told myself that was trust. I told myself that for a long time. There was a period in my mid-40s when I tried to change some of that. I suggested we take a trip somewhere, anywhere, just to have a different set of walls around us for a week. He said that sounded nice. We did not take the trip. I signed us up for a cooking class on Saturday mornings, because I had read something about couples finding common ground in new activities, the kind of advice that sounds reasonable until you try to apply it to a specific person. He came the first 2 weeks and then found reasons to miss the others. I finished the class on my own. I brought food home on Saturday afternoons and put it on the table, and he said it was good, and we ate with the television at a low volume, and did not ask much of each other. I stopped trying new things. Somewhere around 53. I still do not know if that was peace or resignation. The line between those two things is harder to find than I expected. Comfortable can mean two different things. I understand that now better than I did then. I stopped asking certain questions around the time I turned 58. I think he stopped earlier. I do not know by how much. The months before October had a particular quality I did not name at the time. He came home quieter. Not the tired, comfortable silence we had built over the years. Something with a different texture, like a person who is deciding something and has mostly decided. He would sit at the table with his coffee in the morning, and look at the room in a way I had not seen before. Measuring things maybe. Deciding what they were worth. I noticed. I did not say anything. There were evenings where he took calls in the other room, and came back looking settled in a way that had nothing to do with me. I told myself it was work. I had been doing that for so long the explanation came without effort. One morning, maybe 3 weeks before October, I came downstairs and he was already at the table. He looked up when I came in, and then looked back down. We sat across from each other for 10 minutes without speaking. I had the feeling he was working up to something. That he had been working up to it for a while. He did not say anything that morning. He got up and left for work, and I sat with my coffee and looked at the bread basket on the left side of the table. I thought soon. I do not know if I was afraid or ready. I think it may have been both. The papers were signed on a Thursday morning in October. The trees outside had just reached that particular orange, the kind that only lasts a few days before the wind takes it. I remember standing at the front window after he left the room. I stayed there for a while. I was not crying. I was just looking at the color and thinking about how brief it was. I called my younger daughter that evening. She answered on the second ring. I told her what I had done, and she went quiet in a way that was not quite surprise. More like confirmation. Like something she had been waiting to hear for longer than she had told me. She said, "Mama, you do not have to hold it together right now." I told her I was not holding anything together. She was quiet again. That pause between us sat there without filling. Then she asked if I had eaten anything today, and I said yes, and she said good. Neither of us said what we both understood. What he had not known, and what I had not found a way to mention over all those years, was that the Thursday morning he had been arranging himself toward was not quite the morning he had prepared for. I am going to try to explain what I mean by that. It started about 11 years before. I cannot give you an exact date. There was just a feeling I had, the kind you recognize later as having been important at the time. The way a floorboard feels different under your foot in the weeks before anything is visibly wrong. Just a slight give. A change in sound. I was 52 years old. I opened a savings account at a bank across town, a branch I had no other reason to visit. He had no access to it. I put in what I could that first month. Not a large amount. Enough to be intentional. Not enough to draw any attention. I kept putting money in the following month. And the one after that. I want to be careful here about how I describe what I was feeling when I started doing that. I was not angry. I was not afraid, exactly. I was remembering something. I had spent 3 decades sitting beside people at the end of things. Women mostly in their 60s and 70s. Women who had worked and raised families and managed households, and who arrived at the end of a marriage or a life and found that their name was not on the documents that mattered. That what they thought they had built was titled in someone else's name. I remember one woman in particular. I will not use her name. She had been married 43 years. Her husband had passed, and she had expected things to be a certain way, because that is what she had been told. And her son-in-law had come to explain that the house and certain accounts were arranged differently than she had believed. And she had looked at me when he left the room with an expression I saw many times over 30 years of that work. The expression of a person rearranging what they thought they knew. Not shock. Something quieter and more permanent than shock. I held her hand for a while. I did not say anything. There was nothing useful to say. I went home that night and I sat at the kitchen table. The bread basket was on the left side where it always was. He was in the other room. I sat in the quiet for a long time, and thought about what it meant to assume that things had been taken care of. The following week I opened the account. That kind of grief had settled into me in a different way than it settles into the person living it. It had made me careful. Not fearful. Careful. There is a difference. I did not want to become one of those rooms. By the time he moved the bread basket off that pale square, I had 11 years of careful saving behind me. I had a financial advisor in a city 40 miles away who had helped me move things gradually and legally, and without disturbance. The kind of professional who asks no questions that are not strictly necessary. Who keeps her own counsel. Who I found through a woman I had nursed back to health after a surgery and who had told me, quietly as I was leaving, that if I ever needed a name she had one. I had a small property in my name alone that I had purchased 8 years earlier. A modest piece of land, nothing spectacular. But mine. And 2 years before those papers arrived on the kitchen table, I had sat down with an attorney of my own choosing and gone through everything. Not to plan anything specific. Or that is what I told myself. I said I was just being organized. I said I was just getting clear on where things stood. I may have known more than I admitted even to myself. I want to say something here that I have thought about carefully, because I think it would be easy to hear this story and understand it wrong. I was not blameless. There were years when I kept a certain distance between us because closing it felt like more than I had the courage for. There were conversations I put off so long that by the time I was ready to have them, we had both moved past them in ways that made them impossible. I was a faithful wife. I was a good mother. I kept my word. But I was not always honest about what I needed, or about what I saw, and the gap between those things and the life we were actually living grew very slowly over a very long time. And I watched it grow and did not say enough about it. I do not know what would have been different if I had. I do not know if anything would have been different. But I think about it. He came to the house 2 weeks after I signed. His attorney had arranged for him to collect certain items he had listed. I was not there when he arrived. I had left a key with the neighbor across the street, as we had agreed through the lawyers, and I had gone to my younger daughter's house for the day. He called me that evening. I knew from the first word that something had shifted. His voice had a quality I had not heard from him in a long time. Not anger. Something underneath anger. The thing that comes before a person understands what they are feeling. He said that certain things were not where he had expected them to be. He said it carefully, The way a person speaks when they are trying to understand something before they react to it. He meant the filing cabinet in the back room. He meant the storage unit we had rented for 20 years, the one we had accumulated together over 3 decades of marriage. The one that held, among other things, things he had not thought to list in the papers because I think he had stopped thinking about it the way you stop thinking about furniture you pass every day. I told him that those items were in my possession and had been documented in my own records. I told him my attorney would be in touch if there was a discrepancy he wanted to address. He was quiet. It was not a short silence. Then he asked me when I had done all of this. I did not answer right away. I thought about how to say it. I told him I had been paying attention for a long time. He said nothing after that. I heard him breathe. Then the call ended. The storage unit held 11 years of careful documentation. Tax returns going back to when I first opened the account. Insurance policies where my name appeared as sole beneficiary on accounts he had not reviewed in years. Accounts I had made certain were in order, quietly, during the kind of routine administrative tasks that spouses handle without much discussion. The deed to the property. Correspondence I had kept in labeled folders, organized by year, each year in a manila envelope marked in my handwriting. And at the bottom of a box that had once held nursing textbooks, a composition notebook with a black and white cover, the kind I had used in nursing school. I had kept a ledger in it by hand, every month for 11 years. The date, the amount, a line or two about what I had done, not detailed, just enough that I would be able to reconstruct the picture if I ever needed to. I did not keep it because I knew exactly what it was building toward. I kept it because keeping it felt like the thing my mother would have done. Because the person who walks away calm has already counted what they are carrying. I had counted. Every month. For 11 years. I moved to a smaller place on the east side of Birmingham that November. It had large windows that let in the morning light at an angle I had not expected, and a kitchen with enough room for a table and 2 chairs and a small window above the sink that looked out at a yard that was mine to do whatever I wanted with. I bought a kitchen table. I chose it myself. It had no pale square, where something had always sat. No scratches that were not mine. Nothing protected and nothing exposed except what I had placed there. My younger daughter came that first weekend to help me hang curtains. She brought coffee and pastries from a place she liked, and we worked through the morning and into the afternoon, and we talked about ordinary things, her job, her daughter, a book she was reading, and we did not say much about the year that had just passed. At the end of the day she stood in the kitchen doorway and looked around the room for a moment. She said, "Mama, this feels like you." I looked at the table, the windows, the light coming in at that angle. I said yes. That is what I was going for. She left around 5 o'clock. I stood in the kitchen alone for a while after the door closed, just standing there in the quiet. The kind of quiet that is actually quiet. I still think about that pale square of wood sometimes. That lighter patch of table where the bread basket had always sat, protected from years of light and air, preserved without anyone planning it. He moved the basket without thinking. He set his papers down on it. He pushed a pen toward me, and I think he believed he had seen everything there was to see at that table. Something kept in one place for a long time looks different from the things around it. Lighter. You could call it absence, if you did not know what you were looking at. I have thought about what to call it. I am still not sure I have the right word. I just know what it felt like to stand in that kitchen, in that morning light, with a table that was mine, in a house where everything in it I had placed there myself. Some things you protect for so long you almost forget they are there. Almost.